Hi Piano Explorers, welcome to segment 2. This is when we do our vocabulary cards and our sheets. Before we start with our vocabulary cards, I'd like to go over what we worked on last week for our new sheets. This was our new lesson last week. Do you remember the tied notes? Remember what tied notes are? Tied notes must be on the same line or the same space with this little slur under, or sometimes it's above the notes. You must remember that they have to look exactly the same. They can be a quarter note and a dotted half note. They could be a whole note and a half note, but they must be on the same line or in the same space to be called tied notes. And how you play the tied note, if you remember, you hold the notes down for the value of the combined notes. So the total value of this plus this, which is 3 plus 3, equals 6 beats. And remember why we have tied notes? If we don't have a note that's bigger than a 4-beat note, and we don't have one, we must use tied notes if the composer wants us to hold the note longer than 4 beats. Okay? So that's why we use tied notes. We also went over legato playing and phrasing. So remember, legato playing means to connect the notes smoothly. And this is called a slur. It indicates for us as a musician how to play the notes. When we see the curved line, the slur over the notes, it tells us that we're connecting one note to the next like a seesaw. I'll play one for you. Those are connected notes. If I don't connect them, they sound like this. Hear the difference? Okay. The other thing that this slur tells us is that if we have a longer than 2-note slur, we're going to get louder and get softer. Get louder and get softer. I'll play that for you again and listen. I'm going to start at an MF dynamic. Okay, so I got louder as I went up and softer as I came back down. But I started MF and I ended MF. If we have a 2-note phrase, this is different. This is the note that is loud and this note is softer. Louder, softer, louder, softer, like this. So you emphasize the first note, you stress the first note, and lighten up on the second note to play a 2-note phrase. The other thing that was noticed was instead of calling these notes here, moving this way, interval steps, we call them now intervals of a second. So when I go from a line to the very next space, or a space to the very next line, I don't skip anything. So I'm playing what we call an interval of a second. So if I started on a C and I went up a second, I would go to D. If I started on a D and I went up a second, I would go to E. If I come down from E and I go down a second, I play D. If I go down from D, 1 with interval of a second, I play C. Okay? So these are interval seconds up, interval of a second down, interval of a second down. 2 intervals of a second going down, 2 intervals of seconds going up. The note is repeated and then down a second. Okay, do you remember that? All right, great. So now I'm going to show you the new picture of the intervals of a third. And you already have seen thirds, you just call them skips. So now we're going to notice that instead of calling this a skip up and a skip down and a skip up and a skip up and a skip down and a skip up, we're going to call them intervals of a third. If I start on this line, I go from line, I skip the space, and I go to the next line. That's 3 steps up, okay? 1, 2, 3. From this line to this space to this line. 1, 2, 3. That's 3 notes up. So say I call this a C. D would be in the space, and this would be E. So C to E is an interval of a third. All right? So remember this. Thirds go to the same thing. If you start on a line, you go to a line. If you start in a space, you go to a space. This is a third going up, and then a third going down, and a third going up, and now I have the space ones. A space to space going up is a third going up. A space to space skipping that line. See, I skipped the line. That's the middle one. 1, 2, 3. Line, space, line. That's 3. This is a third going down, and then space to space, skipping the line, is a third going up. Okay. Now let's just run through our flashcards. Here we go. 1 beat, 2 beats. I'm showing you the answers today. 3 beats, 4 beats. 4/4 time means there are 4 beats in each measure, and a quarter note receives 1 beat when that number 4 is on the bottom. 3/4, 3 beats in a measure, or 3 beats in a group. The stop sign. The repeat sign. Notice the 2 dots. The bar line divides the music into equal measures. The letter P, soft. The word in Italian is piano. F, the word is loud. In Italian, it's forte. MF, moderately loud or medium loud. In Italian is mezzo forte. Here is the F clef on the 5 lines and 4 spaces called the bass staff. And this 4th line between those 2 dots is where we draw the F. And where we play that F is the first F to the left of the center, just below middle C. So I'm going to go down from middle C so we can find it. C, B, A, G, F. Good. And here's the G clef on the 5 lines and 4 spaces. The whole thing is called the treble staff, and it's the first G to the right of the center. Notice that's the 2nd line. I'm going up from middle C, and there's the G, G. Here is another new lesson that we just learned a few weeks ago. This is the grand staff, and this little picture is the brace. When we join the treble and the bass staves together with the brace, we form what we call the grand staff. And piano music is written on the grand staff. So this would be considered one line of music, one whole line of music. Here's middle C, middle C. Okay, this is middle C for the treble staff and middle C for the bass staff, but it's the same note. Okay, middle C is the center spot between the bass and the treble staff. It's the midpoint. Okay, there we go. Here's your bass clef with your notes going down. Let's say them. F, E, D, C. Bass clef, F, G, F, E. Notice the 4th line is your F line, the top dot space is G, and the bottom dot space is E. Here are the treble clef notes. G, F, E, D, C. See why it's so important to know the alphabet going backwards? And here is the treble staff, starting on the 2nd line G, up a 2nd, A, down a 2nd, G, down a 2nd, F, and back up to G. All right? Notice space number 1 is F. Space number 2 is A. So from F to A, we go an interval of a third because we skipped the line. here's your grand staff with a middle C position note shown for both. Here's your alphabet. Say it for me. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and backwards. G, F, E, D, C, B, A. Great. And there we go. Tied notes, which we saw in the beginning. Legato playing. Intervals of a second. And the new one, intervals of a third. Okay, everyone. That's it for that section, and we will see you back in segment 3.